Wednesday, March the 22nd. Lake level is a little over 907. It's come up, 2 or 3 inches, but it pretty much hasn't changed in the last 2.5 months or so. I didn't do a fishing report last week. My camera operator was in Mexico. But water temperature, it's really come up a bunch. It cooled down again today because I got cold last night, but a lot of mid-50 degree water, and I have found some water in the real high 50s, late yesterday afternoon. But fish are really on the move. There's a lot of buck bass moving up shallow. I've actually seen some bucks up there starting to make some beds. If it doesn't get too awful cold, I think, middle of next week we'll see several fish on spawning beds. There's probably some up in the upper river arms right now. I just haven't seen them. Now, there's a lot of different things going on in the lake the same way that we've been catching them for a while. Over the deep water with an underspin, a little kitech and a swim bait out off of main lake, deeper structure and in the creeks. That's still going to hold up for a while because there's still a lot of fish out in that deeper water that are coming up and suspended. Along with the jerkbait bite and the swim bait bite. A lot of them fish are only suspended about 10 to 15 foot deep, but they might be over 40 or 50. And what you want to look for is like bluff ends, channel swings up against the banks, and even the same things in the creeks. But with everything moving, there's a ton of fish shallow. The smallmouth seem to be everywhere on the flat gravel banks. A lot of times all you got to do is set the boat and 20 to 25 feet of water, and either throw a little 1/4 ounce or 3/8 underspin with like a 2.8 kitech or a smoke grub or salt and pepper grub, or you can use them on just a jig head. Some days they'll be on the bottom, some days they'll be suspended, and the wind helps a little bit as long as you don't get too much. If you get too much wind, a lot of them same areas, you can catch them on a jerkbait. Now, the slime in the lake is getting better all the time. If you get up to White River, up towards Campbell Point and in the mid-James, you'll notice the water has got kind of like a funky color to it. And what that is, it's a lot of that moss breaking loose and kind of mixing up in the water, giving the water a little bit of stain. But like I say, it's also clearing up on the bottom where you can fish a bottom bait. And we're catching fish on jigs. Now that they're moving shallow, there are so many different things that you can throw. A lot of the deals you want to key on, spawning pockets or areas where the fish are going to be spawning. And I've had several people send me emails, and when I take people out fishing, they want me to try to explain exactly what I'm looking for in a spawning pocket. Well, on Table Rock, they're apt to spawn almost anywhere, but like a lot of times if you've got a straight deep bluff and then all of a sudden you've got a little pocket in it right off the main lake, fish will spawn in that pocket. Not all our fish go in the backs of the creeks where it's flat. A lot of the Kentuckys and smallmouths will spawn right out there on the main lake on a lot of them flat gravel banks, especially if there's what we call ditches or drains out mixed in with them flats. Usually anytime you turn into a creek or a pocket, any kind of little indentation or swing, like I say, they don't necessarily always go to the backs of the creeks. Them fish that live out there on the main lake, more towards the mouths of the creeks, they're not going to go all the way back to spawn. They're going to stay pretty close to where they live and find an area to spawn. So you don't necessarily have to be going to the backs of the creeks. They'll be out there on the main lake. Little tiny cuts. You want to look where the rock preferably gets a little bit smaller if it's bigger ledge rock. But a lot of times them big largemouth will spawn on them big ledgy rocks. They'll just clear off a spot on top of a flat ledge. And that seems to be predominantly largemouths. The smallmouths and Kentuckys, they're more apt to be in smaller rock, like football size to pea gravel. So like I say, there's a lot of different ways to catch them now that them fish are moving up, starting to get bit on a wobble head a little bit better, and with the moss clearing up, it's getting a lot easier to throw it. And usually what I'm throwing is either a 1/2 ounce or 3/8. This one here, I've got an Ultra Vibe Speed Craw on it. Another bait that I'll use is a Strike King menace. I'll just throw this around the docks on these transitions, these areas where I think these fish are going to spawn. It's a good time to start flipping the dock stalls, pretty much from the first stall back into the shoreline. This is a 3/8 ounce pig sticker Snowden jig, and I've got it tipped with a Strike King Rage Craw, but any kind of small profile jig. And this time of year, especially if it's like 10 to 12 feet at the back of the dock on the shore side, you want to key on underneath the walkway on the back corners of the dock, because that's where a lot of them fish will spawn around the dock. Ned rig is starting to work and will continue to work. Basically all the Ned rig is, for those of you who don't know, it's just a Senko cut in half, and we put almost like a little crappie jig in it. I use either 1/8 ounce, 3/16 or 1/4 ounce, and I'll fish this just like a jig or a tube. Basically just drag it on bottom. And right now you should not have to fish it much deeper than 12 to 15 foot. Now a couple good baits to cover water with right now, like I say, especially where a lot of those buck bass, what I mean by buck bass is those are the males cruising around in them pockets getting ready to make beds for the females. A lot of the females are just going to be set back out a little bit, suspended over that deeper water till it gets right, but the bucks are up there getting ready to start making beds. And I'll throw a Wacky Rig Senko. This is a Strike King Zero, and I usually throw a green pumpkin, watermelon red. Now this particular hook is a mustad hook. It's got about a 1/16 ounce weight. It's got a weed guard in it if I'm fishing it around brush. Another hook I'll use is just this little circle hook. It's almost like a drop shot hook. If I don't want the weight, then I can rig it up weedless, throw it around some brush in behind the docks. Another good bait is a fluke, and I'll usually rig this up like on a 3/0 hook, and I'll just kind of try to cover water where I think a lot of these fish are moving up. Even if you don't catch them on it, you'll get a lot of fish that'll follow it. If I see that, then I'll slow down and either throw the Ned rig or the Senko or even the jig in the same spot. But, you know, the jerk bait, swim baits, all that's going to continue to work. And something else you want to put in your boat, it's time to put them topwater baits in the boat. There's been fish surfacing on and off for a couple weeks, and you're just going to start to see more and more of that as the water temperature warms up. And this time of year, as far as on the topwater, I like to throw a a slow moving bait. I'll throw like a a Strike King Sexy Dog, or a Zara Spook, or like a jointed redfin, or even a Rapala Storm makes a jointed thunderstick that works good. But I want a bait that works real slow, like a walking bait like the Spook, where you can walk it back and forth. The fish still don't, if they're chasing bait up on the surface, they'll bite about anything. But for some of them ones that are in there cruising shallow, they usually don't like something that's moving real fast. So I want a topwater bait where I can keep the bait up on top, give it a real slow presentation, walk it, stop it. Like I said, jointed redfin works good. Swim baits are still going to continue to be a player for quite some time, because like I said, there's still a lot of fish moving up out of the deep water that are suspended. Warmer the water gets, the more aggressive they'll get. And I'll either throw a scrounger head. This is a 3.8 Strike King on just a revenge swim bait head, or even an underspin. Now, as those fish move in a month from now, when some of those fish are done spawning, they're going to be back out there in the same areas where you can catch them on the top water of the swim bait. So, there's a lot of different things happening. The bite's just getting better and better. And even on a lot of these flat gravel banks where I'm talking about catching smallmouths, you'll go down the bank, and usually any place I'm getting bit, I'm getting several bites. You may have to go to 2 or 3 different areas to get more bites, but they're mixed. You'll catch predominantly smallmouth. Then all of a sudden you'll catch a 3 or 4 pound largemouth mixed in, or a couple Kentuckys. There's all kinds of different fish, you know, up on them flats, moving around. Like I said, bite's going to do nothing but continue to get better. So, need to get out there and do some fishing. Until like next week, good luck, good fishing.